Hey Sebastian, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
Yeah,
Hope
thanks
you're fine
for
too.
yeah, thanks for joining us. So we're gonna have this little interview with you about data reports and how
hmm
you use data in your everyday life as a data scientist. So
hmm
just as a quick introduction for everybody, you studied politics and you did your PhD at University of Mannheim, one of Germany's finest, um, and you now work as a data scientist for KPMG. So I thought it might be really useful to get a bit of an insight in your day-to-day work. How do you work with
hmm
data, and how do data reports and really like getting a data set, opening it, and getting an overview? What kind of role does this
Yeah,
play
yeah, yeah.
in your day-to-day life? And I'm pretty sure that this might happen fairly frequently. That you get some data, have to open it up, need to get some overview, and then see
Yeah,
what's going on.
exactly. Daily life stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool, awesome. So yeah, just as a broad introduction so that everybody knows
hmm
a bit more about your background, but from your side now. So you work for KPMG as a data scientist. Um, like, how does a typical data project look like? What kind of work steps are involved
hmm
there? Like, what's a typical workflow when you know you have a client and data's coming in and you have to do stuff with it? How does that look like?
Yeah. So normally even before the project starts, we always have like a phase where we already have the chance to have a look at the data of our client. So what we normally do is we then just go through the data and we try to make like a list of possible questions, and then usually there's a kickoff workshop. So at the beginning of the project, we meet with the client, and there is a chance to talk about like all the open questions. And the other thing which is very important is normally the access question. So normally, if we work with customer client data, it's always in some database. And before the project even starts, we always have to make sure that the process of having access to those databases is established, because you don't want to start the project and then you have to wait like, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 weeks until someone from the IT of the client gives you access to the data you want to work with from the beginning.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, normally what we do is like you get data, you analyze it, you get an overview, you collect the questions, you then ask the customer, you then present your first insights, you talk about how the data is good, what is bad, like whether you need more data, whether you need specific data. You then usually, depending on the project, train and like implement whatever algorithm or analysis. And then, of course, at the end, you want to deploy something, meaning you want to put everything into production, given that everything works as expected.
Okay, that's really cool. So I think there are two kind of projects here, right? Or
hmm
is how it feels. So on the one hand, you have data analysis projects where you
hmm
get some data and need to analyze it and then give a response. And then there are
Yeah,
other kind of projects where you have sort of where you build a data analysis or a data infrastructure that can live with live
exactly.
data
Yeah,
that is
yeah,
coming in, so that you have, I don't know, an analysis
yeah.
machine that evaluates live data. Is that what's
hmm
going on there usually?
Yeah, that's exactly like the two typical scenarios. And of course, like depending on which project we are, also the steps of the data analytics behind, or like what we actually do with the data is different, of course. But yeah, that's a good summary of the two different parts.
Yeah, cool. This is really exciting. Um, so how often do you actually um, receive new data? Like,
hmm
okay, so you've never seen the data before, you need to open it up and you need to get a
hmm
quick overview over what's going on there. How often
hmm
does that actually happen?
I would say, if of course, like it depends on the project, but I would say once a week or every 2 weeks. Of course, it depends.
Mhm.
That I get some totally new data. Of course, we have projects where we get the same data, or the same data following the same structures, for instance, every day or even like every hour, depending on the project. But like new data, I think it's once a week, I would say.
Are there typical work steps involved when you get new data? So is like all data the same to some extent, or is it really does it always vary to a great degree, and you cannot really generalize whether there are any typical things?
So of course it varies. So there isn't the typical data set. It's like there's a lot of variation. But what I can say is what I always do is if I get a data set and I'm at the point where I can actually analyze it, leaving behind all the stuff that you have to do in data pre-processing. So once I'm able to actually load something like a spreadsheet into some Jupyter notebook or some tool to actually have a look at it, I really like to just browse through it. So to have like a first intuition about how many variables, how are they structured? Do I see at first glance whether there are a lot of missing values? Are there some huge values where I then have to ask some questions about how is the data distributed? How many observations? So all of this stuff. And what I really like to do is actually just look at the data, not like calculating some statistics. I will do this afterwards, but at first I really just go through the data and just look at it to get have like a first impression.
Okay, so it's really like in Matrix, you know, you remember
exactly.
the movie where they really like are, okay, so this is just all the numbers and it's flowing like that, right? Is it a little bit like that?
Yeah, it's a little bit like that. It's just like I don't want to calculate anything or actually, I don't know, figure out whether it's useful or not. I just want to see like in what shape is the data, because that's also like a very important point. Data is not always like the data I get is always messy. It's not like that I get this nice spreadsheet, like it's very rare. So I want to see how bad is it. So like how much effort do I have to put into pre-processing the data, and that at some point we can actually analyze it.
Yeah, I think that's in particular for teaching, you know, that's always a big, I mean, here this class, since we really start from scratch. I think I think I will even in the first 2 or 3 weeks, we will even pre-process data so that the data really screams at you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Nice and well behaved.
Yeah.
But data in the wild often looks quite different from what you get in.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
So you said that you the first thing you do is you actually take a look at the numbers just to see whether by eyeballing whether anything remarkable pops up where you would have to ask the client. But if you are past that stage and you know that, well, okay, yeah, I have a couple of missing values here and I don't know, floating point mistakes in that variable or something. What do you then actually do as a next step in order to get really an overview over how the data really looks like? How do you describe the data? How do you summarize what's going on there as next steps?
So on the one hand, I calculate some descriptive statistics, which I will can tell you in a minute. And also I like to visualize the stuff, because visualization is very often gives you a way better impression of how the data is distributed and shaped than the actual numbers themselves. What I always do is, for instance, I look for imbalanced data, meaning whether there are some interesting distributions, for instance, whether the outcome I want to predict or I want to explain is differently shaped. So whether one of the classes, for instance, appears way more often than the other. One very important thing is missing values. So I need to know how many valid data points are in my data set that I can actually use for my analysis later. That's a very important point. And also, of course, like how many observations do I have overall? Because sometimes you get a spreadsheet or you have like this nice table and then you have, I don't know, 10,000 different observations or data points, but at the end, you can only use 1,000 of them because all the others have some missing values. I don't know, the values, they do not fit, so something must have been wrong there. Another important point is also duplicates. So that if you have a data set that the same row appears more than once, and then of course I have to figure out why is this the case. So was there a mistake made by me maybe when I pre-processed the data? Was the mistake already before I got the data? So when I don't know, downloaded from the database or something, or even maybe it's right in this particular case that there are like duplicate so that this entry appears in the data set twice. And like what I always try to figure out is like, do the values make sense in some regard? So is the data structure overall valid? So for instance, so I work a lot of natural language processing topics. So I work a lot with documents and text and everything. And very often you have the case that you want to predict something on the document level so that every document has one outcome, like, I don't know, yes or no. And then I want to see, is this the case for all my observations? So do all of them just have like one outcome, or are there some documents where there are multiple outcomes? And if this is the case, why is this? So these, I think, are like my basic steps. And what do I calculate? I calculate like the very basic descriptive metrics, like I calculate the mean, I calculate the standard deviation, and also I use them for outlier detection to figure out like, are there some entries where like which do not fit to the overall pattern? And if so, again, I have to ask, why is this the case? And do I have to ask the customer about this?
Do you have some even, I don't know, scripts that you have pre-written for this data analytics? And it seems to be quite repetitive, and since consultancy is all about efficiency, because this is the delta where you do make the money. Do you have some prefabricated stuff, or is it always from scratch when you write R code?
No. Like for the stuff I just described, like duplicates, missing values, and do I have some imbalances in my data set, and all like how many observations and everything. I just have some R script or Python, depending on like what we use in the project, which I just run all the time. And then, of course, like for instance, if I know this is a large project, we will receive similar data every week or every 2 weeks, I then write a specific descriptive script just for this particular kind of data set. So that like every time I get the new data set and I know that it's in the same structure all the time, so the code always runs smoothly, I just get like to see something is missing, or why do I have only that few observations this time? Last week there were, I don't know, 1,000 more. So this is a very common thing in like not only in consulting, I guess, but like in all the companies that deal regularly with like those data sets, I guess.
Cool. Okay. Second last question. So we will be learning R in this class. It is a bit, I mean, you remember maybe from back in the days when you learned how to do stuff in R. It takes a bit of time to wrap your head around R. Given that given what you are doing at the moment, are you using it regularly? And do you think this is a useful thing to do for the students to actually invest the time in learning R?
I definitely would say so. So in my daily work, because I first learned R and then Python, I still use R for everything that needs to be done quickly. So if like for exactly this the thing I just described, so if I need to get a very quick understanding of the data, I just use R because I just feel like more fluent in it. I just feel more familiar with it. And what I like even more is that you have the possibility to use like R Markdown, like to have those, you can actually write those reports, and you can actually like use everything you calculated just in this report. So you don't have to make an Excel report in Word or in like whatever other tool. You can just run or write the whole report and run the analysis in one script or like in one tool, like in RStudio. And this is what I really like about, and also and what my superiors really like about, because of course it saves you some time if you can run the analysis and the report like in the same step.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So last question: do you have any kind of recommendation for the students in the data science class? And I mean, given that you are a political scientist working as a data scientist in industry, is there any insight that you want to share, that you want to make sure that that they know, or how would we say in German, mit auf den Weg geben?
Yeah, of course. No, that's very a good point. And so I think what we're trained for is actually to find some pattern and then think about why the patterns exist, or why is it like, why do we observe something? And actually this is very, very important, because I like made the experience that many of my colleagues who have like a computer science background, or like come from another like non-social science department, they just take the data and they do not care like how the data was generated. They just accept it as it is. And I found out that it's very, very important to like try to understand the data generating process behind, meaning like to understand what was the business process behind, or why is the data shaped as it is. So not just taking everything for granted, but like thinking about how, like, why, what can we observe here? Maybe there's another pattern that we can just see by thinking about it or reasoning about it, not just running some fancy methods or algorithm, because like very often thinking outperforms running the fancy methods. And this is what I would definitely say. And also that you always try to talk to the customer or the client, or like the person working with the data, like the person that actually produced the data, maybe, because they understand their data, because they build it. So that's very often very, very helpful. And like the last thing, what I also learned the hard way, is that documentation and also writing reports, it's very important, especially if you're in a fast moving environment. So like you will not work on the same project for like 2 years or something. You will maybe work like on like in 2 projects at the same time, and every 2 months you switch the project. And then after 1 year, you've worked on so many projects, and very often there will be then another project with the same client, and then you wonder like, oh, what did I do last year? Why, like, did we already try out this algorithm? And why was the data messy at this day? Or I don't know. So documentation, writing reports, it's crucial. And it also like helps you to save resources, so time and money in the long run, because maybe at the moment you don't like it that you have to write down like your analysis results and like what you found out and what you did and what you tried, but I'm very sure that the future you will thank you for actually doing this in the past. So this would be my last, but also very, very important advice for future data scientists.
Okay, cool, Sebastian. Thank you so much. Let
You're
us
welcome.
with this interview.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. This was really, really insightful. And yeah, I guess students have a much better idea about why these data reports really matter, and how you can use them, and why they are not only useful for others, but also for yourself.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, for having the opportunity to talk about my work. I always like to talk about my work and to share some insights. So it was my pleasure.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.